Welcome into the Fallout. Everyone tuning in on YouTube, everyone tuning in on the live streams. Thank you so much for joining us. Matt Baker and Santiago Beltran with you as we are most post-match days to, at this point, just try to talk you through it because I don't know what else there is to do right now, Santi, as we sit on May 18th. 2 wins, still going strong, quote unquote, with 2 wins in 2025. Now over halfway through May. What do you make of it? Are you at least having a good morning?
I am, yeah. I'm here talking to you. But
Here's
yeah,
good.
2 wins, are basically almost mid-season. 14 match days, and half season is 17, and a lot of ground to make up if the team wants to turn things around and at least get a playoff spot.
A lot of ground to make up. I mean, it's just it's not fun to be doing this the day after not just a loss, but like the performance that we saw on the field was so blah. There was no fire, there was no fight, there were disconnections going on all over the place. The second half decision making continues to baffle me. I can, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but like there's certain things I understand about the team that we put on the field. And in some ways, I wanted to see some of the players we put on the field. I wanted to see what they had to offer. And it just wasn't. It wasn't anything. It wasn't anything quality. It wasn't anything connecting. It wasn't individual brilliance. So you couldn't even gloss over large portions of the game with like really good individual moments because nothing. And even when we did have an individual moment, it didn't fall. So it's really hard to just point the finger at one specific thing. And I know there's one obvious thing that we're going to talk about. The head coach, spoiler alert, but there's just so many things that cascade from that you could gloss over poor coaching with really high quality individual play and players that can turn bad tactics into goals or into better chances created. And that's not happening right now.
Yeah, it was a bad performance for sure. Before Minnesota scored, it didn't look too bad, but it's just like, and it has happened most of the season after the opponent scores, things go down very quickly.
You ready to get going on the pod recording anyway?
Let's do it.
I've got my Gruther Firth jersey on because they're in a relegation battle match. It's one of those teams where they're in the Bundesliga too, which is hilarious given the context of our team right now. But I leave it up to the soccer gods and how I support some teams throughout the world. And the soccer gods decided to send me this as an away. I got it from the website Away Kits, which is a mystery kit site. And I let them decide who a German team I would root for would be, since I don't have any vested interests.
Right. Hey, at least we don't have to worry about relegation.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Gruther Firth is facing Hamburger, the number 1 team in the Bundesliga 2, at 8:30 this morning. And if they lose, they risk falling into the relegation zone, which in the Bundesliga, either the bottom 2 get relegated or the third from the bottom get into a playoff match. So it could make the playoffs.
Oh, yeah. That would be positive for them.
All right, ready to go?
Let's do it.
Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined as always by my friend in soccer, Santiago Beltran, for another Flyover Fallout. And it's another City loss. There's no way to gloss over this one. It was a bad performance. We're here to talk it through. Santi, welcome you in. How's it going post-game? We're recording this on Sunday.
Matt, doing great. But again, the team failed to get a result, and now winless streak was a record-setting 10 games without a win, which is the longest for City. And it's just a little disappointed with what I saw on the field. One thing is to lose a game, but then the way the game ended and the team not showing any fire, it's just disappointing.
Oof. I had to double check that because I had heard that this was our longest winless streak. And given last season and what led into Bradley Carnell's dismissal. That stat seems hard to swallow at the very least. The fact that we are currently in year 3, we are currently in our longest winless streak, having lost 9 in a row last season. That began with LAFC on May 16th and May 15th, and then ended with Bradley Carnell's, I think that was his dismissal game.
It was.
After June 29th. So
Mm-hmm.
Bradley Carnell lost 9. He failed to win 9 in a row and then was dismissed. Olaf Melberg has failed to win 10 in a row. And as we sit at least early on Sunday morning, less than 12 hours removed from this game, he still has his job. And he, for all intents and purposes, will, unless we hear otherwise, be coaching on Wednesday in the U.S. Open Cup against the same Minnesota United team. We talked at length, Phil and I did, on Flyover on this past Thursday. Scenarios, what ifs, when will the leash be too tight for Olaf Melberg? And we don't have those kinds of answers. All we can look at are these kinds of things, where precedent was set last season, 9 matches, Bradley Carnell's let go because the playoffs are starting to slip out of reach. Not to completely skip this game, because we are going to cover this game for sure. But this is one of the bigger stories, is the fact that we've now slipped into 14th place, 14 matches into the season of a 34-match season. 14th place, 11 points, already 7 points out of a playoff spot. It's the LA Galaxy made news this week because, given their awful start to the season, 0 wins, 10 losses, and 3 draws for the Galaxy, they just re-signed their head coach to an extension. But they're coming off of an MLS Cup win. So it's the conversation of, would you sacrifice a season if it meant winning an MLS Cup? And that's kind of what the Galaxy have done. And they've shown enough, their coaching staff has shown enough promise that they got the extension. There's little sense that it makes to many fans in that regard, but we are very much in the opposite direction here, where we never built a team good enough to win MLS Cup. There isn't a would you win MLS Cup if it meant sacrificing a season, because now we're in the second season that seems to be wasting away with no answers in sight. Because if you get rid of Olaf Melberg and you bring in John Hackworth for interim round 2 or someone else, because if Olaf goes, Vali goes too. The guy the assistant who coached the other night. No questions about that. So what happens in that case? Is it just a case of you really don't believe enough in what Olaf is doing, but you believe enough in the rest of the organization, and basically you're acknowledging the fact that Olaf is not doing what you brought him in here to do tactically, not just getting the results, but tactically, the game plan he's implementing on the field, the substitutions in the second half, utilizing all the players. That's what you're acknowledging if you get rid of Olaf. And like I said on Thursday, there is a path forward to Lutz remaining with the club and getting rid of Olaf. It doesn't have to be necessarily a zero-sum game, and that this is Lutz's third decision on who takes over for City after Carnell putting Hackworth in the spot and then Olaf. There are a lot of things that look bad in the sense of what you passed over with John Hackworth when you went with Olaf Melberg, or the fact that the coaching search was so long and you ended up with Olaf Melberg, and now this is what you're getting. I don't want to rehash all of these things, but I feel I want to bring forward some of that conversation we had during the wind down on this last episode, because it's so much more pertinent now, having lost another game and it being one of our worst. Like the one of the big stories and themes, and I'm having this conversation with folks on social media, is we have looked fairly good at times in this 10-game losing streak. Our defensive structure has completely fallen apart, but this was also our worst XG performance since our game against Austin. Y'all remember the Austin FC game? It was the second game in this losing streak, where after we lost to a depleted Philadelphia side, we came home and we lost to Austin. That match, we had 0.8 XG. And it was a terrible game from a chance creation perspective, but we've had so much better since then. The SKC game, the Columbus Crew game, the San Diego game, those were we had better chances, more chances. Finishing remains an issue throughout this. That's a constant theme. But this Minnesota game was 0.6 XG. It was only the 4th time all season in 14 games we've had an XG less than 1. And XGs do reflect better chance creations, better shot opportunities. So there's value in looking at least ancillarily to that kind of stat and trending it throughout the season. So there's a lot of data here, Santi, to say that we played somewhat decently during this losing stretch, at least in creating something. But this match was just such a step in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and there have been good moments through this 10-game winless streak where the team has shown good things, but it's just not consistent. And Henry Kessler was saying it on the pre-match presser, like he was like, "Yeah, we just have to put a 90-minute performance together," and we haven't. And obviously, it wasn't last night. And yeah, the team can build off those good moments, but like when, like it's just running out of time. Like yeah, it's starting like 14 plays, and now it's starting to separate in the playoff race. And basically, if it doesn't start getting results soon, the season is gonna go to a waste.
Go straight to a question in our live stream chat. Aaron asks, is the length of Olaf's contract a factor in keeping him safe, with money being a factor? And unless there's something massively unique in Olaf's contract, my answer is no. Bradley Carnell signed an extension just months before he was dismissed. MLS contracts for head coaches, I don't know how they compare to the rest of the world, but there's no safety in that. You can be dismissed for a poor job performance regardless of mitigating factors. Now, you might have to pay it out. Like, I don't know if there's a clause in Olaf's contract that may say that if he's dismissed before a certain period of time, he's owed a certain amount of money. That could always be at play. You know, that might be what Aaron's really getting at. So that could be a factor. But the ability to get rid of a head coach at MLS is always there. That's always on the table. The windfall, the amount you'd have to pay, it could be different.
And I wouldn't think he's a very expensive coach.
Given his resume coming in, I get that he's a world-class player, but given his resume as a head coach, there is no reason to think that he would be looking at a 6-7 figure windfall if we had to dismiss him. There's a question on Instagram. Christopher asks, is the Villa match on 7:30 keeping Olaf his job right now? It better not be. I want to dismiss that question out of hand because it seems absolutely absurd. I get the optics would be cool if you brought Aston Villa in here. Maybe that's why you worked with Aston Villa in the first place. But that is such a that notion is such a slap in the face to City fans. I mean, the absolute nerve that an organization would have to put up with this kind of losing streak with no end in sight to the lack of overall quality that the players are showing, the lack of drive and fight, the lack of a game plan that has any coherency to it. The absolute nerve an organization would have to put up with all of that for an additional 2.5 months, just so you could have the storyline of the former star of Aston Villa, the former captain of Aston Villa, hosting his former club now in that's beyond absurd to me. I get why the question is asked, and yes, it's a thought because obviously you make the correlation. So I'm not deriding the thought because I've seen it a few places, but the absurdity that you would have to assume the organization has for that to be a contributing factor is too much for even my mind to handle.
Yeah, and that's more than 2 months from now. So yeah, I hope it doesn't have anything to do with it. Yeah, good storyline if it happens, and if he's still here, maybe he turns things around. But hopefully, there is no correlation, and the team will make the best decisions in the next few weeks if things don't turn around.
On the other fronts, and I'm kind of harping on this just a little bit before we get into the actual game because I've got this nagging feeling that our podcast could be very outdated in a very short period of time if Olaf is let go. And so I do want to address this and probably going to keep addressing this for that purpose. Like we would cover it if it happens afterwards and the fallout to that. But this, I don't know. I've got this different feeling about me now that we're into this 10 game winless streak where something else seems to be going on behind the scenes that is more than just results driven. It's more than just saying we set a goal for ourselves to win the playoffs or to make the playoffs, rather, to make the playoffs. And we're sitting here in May 18th, a month and a half earlier than last season, and we're already saying we might be too far behind. Because when you're looking at a club that's averaging 0.79 points per game when it comes to your matches and how many points you can take in each game, 0.79, the playoff line is usually around 1.3, 1.4, 1.45 points per game. So we would need to now have, we haven't done the math yet because we're just not excited to do that. And we're not masochists in that regard, but it would now start to be a Herculean effort to get to that point. And so, yeah, go.
Just a spoiler. I did something.
You did do the math.
Something very quick. City will need to get more than 50% of the remaining points to make the playoffs.
More than 50% of the remaining points to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Does this seem like a team with or without the head coach that could do it? I mean, with the head coach, it definitely doesn't seem like a team that could do it.
It still looks like a huge task, but it's not impossible. But you have to start getting some wins.
And what's it going to take to kickstart that? Because that seems like as fine of a segue as anything to actually look at this match, because this match was not the thing to kickstart it. The starting 11 for this match really gave off vibes at first glance of we are prioritizing the U.S. Open Cup during midweek. There was some positives to look at in the lineup, and there was some glass half full approaches ahead of time, but none of them panned out. The starting 11, we were 2 off from our guesses, but the two misses that we had on our projected starting 11, they weren't just impactful because they were different players. They were impactful because of where the differences were. The starting 11 the City rolled out had a 3-man backline of Kyle Hebert, Josh Yaro, and Timo Baumgartel in front of Roman Berkey. A midfield that looked like Celio Pompeu on the left wing, JGR, Tomas Ostrak at central midfield, and Akil Watts on the right wing backside. Marcel Hartl, Conrad Walla made up a double 10, and Cedric Teuchert was our lone quote-unquote striker. It was a 3-4-2-1-ish. Celio continued his hybrid role on that left, so he would press up at times when we were in possession. He would be on that same line as Cedric Teuchert, Marcel Hartl at times. But in defense, when Minnesota had the ball, he would drop back and help on that left wing backside. This was Jake Girdwood-Reich's first start of 2025 at central midfield. And the fact that we had picked up a short-term loan from City 2's Cam Silly ahead of this match really shows the lack of depth that we were running into with our central midfield. You had guys who could play central midfield in Marcel Hartl and Conrad Wallem, but this lineup pushed them a little higher up on the field, and you brought in Jake Girdwood-Reich, who we'd wanted to see and ask, why is he not an option at the defensive midfield position if you're having to pull back guys like Conrad Wallem and Marcel Hartl? Put him, where's Jake Girdwood-Reich in this that could help at least fill a gap and fill a hole so you can have some of those better players in the attack. We at least saw that in this game. So conceptually, that was okay with me. The rest of this, though, the rotation due to U.S. Open Cup, the reason I mentioned that was Klaus was out and Henry Kessler was out. Kessler having gone 15 minutes and being available in the press conference, usually an indication that the next steps after that 15 minutes is 45 or more.
Mm-hmm.
The availability in the press conference typically hints at a player that is more than likely able to start and will start the next game. You know, obviously it's 1 or 2 days out, so things could change, but not having Henry Kessler in there along with Klaus, a pretty clear sign that I think those 2 players at least are being targeted for the Wednesday midweek match. But the biggest thing in not having Klaus is that the difference in our projection was Henry Kessler for Josh Yaro, where Yaro started. And that's a like-for-like center back. Yaro was playing central center back. But when you take out Klaus and you put in JGR, inherently, you're taking out an attacker and putting in a defender. And Olaf kind of alluded to this post-game in one of his comments, really talking about how they started the game with only one clear striker and it made us solid defensively. And then he talked about conceding nothing in open play early on, obviously post-game trying to look at positives and explanations for what was going on. But that notion we've seen before, and we saw it earlier in the season. It was one of those things that started the whole meme of starting 5 center backs in a game and starting 8 defenders in a game, is taking out an attacker and putting in a defender. And when you travel to Minnesota and that's your game plan, it seems like from the onset you're playing for a draw.
Yeah, yeah, you could take it that way, taking an attacker and put a defender. But the way I saw it, first, as you mentioned, finally giving JGR a look,
Mm-hmm.
which was good. Good to see if he could be an option at that number 6 role. But when you do that, you give more freedom to players like Hartel, Wallem. Hartel, up to a couple of games ago, have been playing that number 6, and to
True.
me that wasn't working. He needs to be on the attacking side and not having those defensive responsibilities. So I wouldn't take it as offensive player for defensive player. You're pretty one more defender. You're actually giving more flexibility and liberty to some of the other guys.
That's fair. And so it's more of a different tactical approach, giving some of that extra, letting some of the players we've wanted to see in the attacking third more often, giving them that freedom to move up.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. Then when we
That's fair.
look at what happened in the game, it didn't pan out that way.
Well, some of the big themes that I had in this game, I mentioned the XG, which kind of the looking at the XG gets you data in how our chances in buildup were. And on the builds, I didn't even see, I saw no individual skill on the ball. I saw no connectivity with off the ball movements. And these are some themes that we've seen, but the really frustrating thing to me is that we had greater than 50% possession for huge amounts of the game. We were having control of the ball. It was just very inefficient. And when you're not having the combination of individual skill on the ball and connectivity with off the ball movement, that's where what I mean by that is really getting to watching players when they have the ball and they're looking for options. When they find an option, when they make a first pass, when, like, let's say Baumgartel makes a pass up to Watts, nobody else is moving on the field to assist Akil Watts. Nobody is doing anything to make his life easier and to put him in a better opportunity to pass the ball. And that's just one example. You can look all over the field because it was happening when Salio had the ball in the final third, and he was kind of going 1v1, waiting for players to do it's like the Ostrak move in the last game where Salio had the ball in the final third on the left wing, and Ostrak makes this run in support of him in the left channel. Ostrak is found, and then Ostrak has his shot that's deflected into Toyshirt for the goal. Like, that kind of off the ball movement is so anemic when it comes to what this team is doing consistently. It's more just wait around and watch and wait for the ball carrier to do something, find some other player. It's everybody standing still more or less, or at least meandering in progression up the field. It's very, very few times that they make serious runs near the ball. I'm not talking about players that are trying to cut or make a line breaking run behind the back line, and so you look to send the ball. I'm not talking about that kind of off ball movement. I'm talking in support near the player who has the ball, so you can do something in your buildups. Minnesota did this so many times. Every single team we play has done this better than us at different times, especially the teams high in possession. San Diego, Seattle, LAFC, all these teams are much better at doing that. Columbus is they can teach a masterclass in this kind of off the ball movement, and they did against us. So to not see any kind of growth in those areas, and in this game to see, I would say, a step back, is so frustrating.
Yeah, I was looking at the highlights this morning and just watching Minnesota's goal. Their goal basically encompasses what you were saying, like
Yeah.
guys running, finding spaces. I was like, oh, where was that last night for City, and where has it been? Now we haven't seen it much. And yeah, that was lacking yesterday. And yeah, just thinking, you mentioned Celio having to just rely on the 1v1 to wait for somebody to show and maybe open a space. Like a lot of time, he didn't touch the ball a lot yesterday. But when he had it, most of the times he had two Minnesota guys on him, but there wasn't anybody like nearby, like to take advantage of any space Minnesota will leave. But yeah, Minnesota controlled Celio well when he had the ball. Most of the times, two guys on him,
Yeah.
but there wasn't anybody like supporting him, and we saw that a lot of times. Just guys not making runs or trying to open, and as you said, it was very anemic, a very anemic performance last night.
And that's one of the things I think that's crucial for Salio is he needs that kind of support, because with the quality he has on the ball, the touch that he has, and his ability to beat players 1v1, he's going to draw in 2v1s. Like, that was a good tactical adjustment that Minnesota made. That was a good game plan to put 2 players on Salio when he had the ball, because they probably understood we don't have the support off the ball to allow him to do much. If he's not able to create space himself, he's not getting the support from many other players in consistent amounts to do something with. The example I gave with Tomas Ostrak was a few and far between, and it worked out well, thankfully. But we didn't see anything like that in this Minnesota game, and that was a credit to Minnesota in how they neutralized Salio, because that is a way to neutralize Salio. You keep him on an island. You don't let him have 1v1s. You put 2v1s on him, and you kind of what St. Louis is going to offer him in support, at least nearby. Salio could always send the ball if he gets a little bit of space, but that's just one of those 50-50 duels that we have hated to see, sending the ball and just hoping something happens when you're sending it to an area that is already occupied by more defenders than it is attackers. So you look at other problems in this game. The wings couldn't progress into dangerous areas. They weren't getting into the penalty area, most notably. We've got some stats that really back that up that aren't fun to look at, but I mean, they tell the story. But you also had in support of the idea where the builds were poor and you weren't getting support near the ball. It was pass and wait for the ball handler to either find you or pass back. So passing back was the other thing that we saw in this game pretty consistently, and we continue to see. There's no creativity shown in our ability to progress using off the ball movement, but there's also no willingness to take those opportunities to take more space. If you're the ball handler, if that's the case, if you're not getting off the ball help, take more space, try to draw in the defenders a little more tight. There's no trust in yourself, it seems, as the ball carrier to have these challenges occur, to be able to take in space, in the midfield in space, 1v1s and win them to help progress the ball individually or create chances. That's not there. So the individual quality on the ball is, or at least the confidence in doing that is lacking. But then even defensively, our midfield was being overrun when Minnesota had the ball. We were putting players into small portions of the field to try and give us advantages defensively, whether it was in the attacking third, on the wings. We were trying to put pressure on Minnesota, but they always seemed to have an answer to figure it out. And it tended to be because it looked like we were ball watching. We weren't man marking players, especially in tight areas in the defensive third, in the penalty area, our defensive penalty area. A couple examples of that were, especially in the third goal when Julian Gressel scored, that was a marking issue. You were trying to overload certain parts of the field to force a turnover, but almost the lazy approach to engaging the ball carrier or forgetting where men were and having Pereira make that run that split between the lines, like you said, and they found him quickly. The slow movement defensively, you can throw as many bodies as you want in a certain area, but if you're slow to react, if you're watching the ball and you're not paying attention to where the players' movements are taking them, you're going to have a bad time every single moment.
Yeah, it wasn't great last night. And Minnesota it's not like Minnesota, like, Minnesota was all over the attack and created a lot of chances. They were effective when they recovered the ball and created chances and were effective converting out those chances. But back to what you were saying about progressing the ball, to me, it looked like nobody. It's like, okay, I have the ball, but I don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah.
So I look left, I look right. There is nobody open. So here you go, ball back to Berkey or to Yarrow and try to start over again. I saw that a lot of times last night.
So let's go into a few of the moments. There are some notable moments, I think. The first one, really the only maybe notable moment for City, was at 21 minutes. It was a set piece by St. Louis. Best chance for a goal all match, I think, probably, when the ball fell to Conrad Wallem in the box and his shot was blocked. After that, Conrad Wallem had one more shot at 34. And after this game, Wallem now has a 1.99 XG overall with 0 goals scored. 15 shots and 7 of those shots being on target. And he still has yet to have a goal. Sometimes you chalk it up to bad luck. Sometimes you chalk it up to bad tactics. With Conrad Wallum, there has a healthy amount of bad luck going on that has prevented him from getting on the score sheet. And that's frustrating because, like, in this moment, he put himself in a good position. Off the set piece, he was in the right place, the right time. And if you look at the first goal that was scored by Minnesota and you're saying, all right, Tani Oluwasi was able to score this goal. Why can't Conrad Wallum score that goal beforehand? Because Santi, this 33-minute goal by Tani Oluwasi was this is the individual quality and creativity that I talk about, that we talk about. When you say that you don't just need to string things together, you can just have one player who knows exactly where he is, he knows where the defenders are, and he has the skill on the ball to make this absurdly creative play. But it happened after a few defensive lapses by City. It happened just by conceding too many chances. You had a corner kick that corner kick that led to the goal was created by a shot that was parried away by Berkey off of another free kick opportunity. So Minnesota is continuing to draw fouls. They're continuing to put the ball in dangerous areas, and eventually something good happened for them. The corner itself went to a Minnesota player who was near the middle to outside part of the box. It was a high and long corner kick, headed towards the goal at that point, that was then blocked down and fell to Oluwasi amidst 5 City players. And the other frustrating thing on this goal is that you had 5 City players in that 6-yard box right near goal, but you had 5 Minnesota players too. So the numbers were there. You had players covered. The problem was you didn't expect Oluwasi to be able to do what he did, and you're covering areas to the side of him. You're making sure that his back is to goal. I am positive that if you're Timo Baumgartl or Josh Yaro, the frustrating thing is you never expected him to be able to do what he did. You thought you had him covered defensively. This wasn't a case of losing where a player was. This was a case of having the player covered and not expecting him to be able to get a shot off the way he did. And so credit to Oluwasi. I mean, there's a lot of credit you have to give Minnesota. You could be frustrated that nobody was in behind him, that you even allowed him to get the ball in that case, and you'd be justified. But this was just a fantastic back heel kick that got past Berkey. Even Berkey was surprised that he was able to get that shot off. This is the creative thing that really high-skilled, high-quality players do. And this was Oluwasi's, I think, 6th goal of the season. We talked about him last week. He just bested City in what he was able to do in this moment.
Yeah, and not only that he got the ball and was creative with what he did with it to score, but Minnesota did a good job yesterday in set pieces and crosses. They found ways to win the ball, to win those aerial duels in City's box, and like this set piece was very well executed. Like Minnesota drew a lot of defenders to the right side and was able to just put the ball in the right place for Oluwasi to put it away, no matter how he did it, and even in a way that you would think, oh, that's not gonna happen. Just too many guys from City around, and nothing happened. But I will give credit to Minnesota. They may have identified something in City's setup because they headed too many balls in City's box, especially in the first half.
Agreed. There was absolutely some tactical advantage they saw and exploited from City. The first half itself, Olaf's comments about being a little strong defensively in the first half, at least ahead of that goal, in the run of play especially, you start to, you obviously as a City fan are frustrated by the lack of goal scoring, and the chance creation, I think, is the most frustrating thing. And this is why my brain at the beginning of the show went to, or maybe it was a third of the way through the show, went to subbing Klaus or using JGR in place of Klaus and having a defensive player. You had a different take, but the reason I had my take was because of the lack of any notable offense in the first half beyond that Conrad Wallum opportunity. In fact, we had only 0.39 XG in the first half, and 2/3 of that came on Conrad Wallum's shot at 21. The reason I mentioned the shot so much is because that was unquestionably our best and only chance in the first half. Otherwise, we had 0.04 XG in open play off of 2 shots for the entire half. That's inexcusable, and it speaks to the lack of the lack of tactical superiority, the lack of any kind of meaningful effectiveness in our attack. We had some decent touches in the final third, but nothing really in the opposition box. In the opponent's box, it was 14-5 touches in the first half. And that kind of flipped on its head in the second half, as we'll talk about. But it really speaks to the inefficiency of City on that front. And then at halftime, we brought in Simon Betcher for Tomas Ostrak. I kind of assume this is an Ostrak fitness thing. Maybe you want to keep him a little ready for Wednesday. That could be an option because we know he can go 80 plus minutes at this point. But with the fixture congestion and the lack of depth in midfield, I think you want to keep Ostrak healthy. So bringing in Betcher for Ostrak, I can see that here.
Yeah, and not only keep Ostrak healthy, but at the same time give some significant time to Simon Betcher.
Yes.
Because he hasn't had a lot of minutes, and maybe also giving him time, see if he could be an option for Wednesday. But yeah, I was okay with that substitution. We were talking on the broadcast that last year when City made all those transfers, like between Hartel, Toyshart, and Betcher, created a lot of goals. And
Yes.
for me, it was good to see that trio on the field.
Absolutely. And at 59 minutes, best chance so far in the second half, highest XG chance. It was on a middle third of the field turnover generated by City. So we did a good job there. But it was, and getting numbers in advantage in transition was good. Cedric Toyshart had a good pass up to Salio, but Salio's shot from the wide left area was blocked away. And it's only notable because that was our best statistical, and it probably passed the eye test of the best chance that came at 59 minutes. And then just 3 minutes later, Minnesota started to open it up. Joaquin Pereira ended up scoring from Tani Oluwasai. It started with a turnover in City's defensive third. And this was a massively frustrating goal given up because it highlights to me everything that we had talked about standing around, the lack of urgency, and really the inability to have the inability to really control the ball and quality on the ball, especially. So it wasn't just City turning it over in the defensive third. Betcher tried to pass it up to Toyshart, who was running, couldn't find him. Toyshart wasn't looking. It was a badly weighted pass, but it led to Minnesota sending it long. So it's not like Minnesota had an initial build right from this turnover and they just carved us up. They relied on the fact that we couldn't repossess the ball. We couldn't recover the ball at all because this sending it long after our turnover, the ball was disrupted by Baumgartel immediately. So we disrupted that long pass and that attempt to catch us off guard really quickly. But the ball just kind of deflected to midfield and didn't go anywhere. Nobody could make a play. Nobody was near it. And so it was scooped up by Minnesota on the left wing, and they started passing it long again. It's disrupted by City again. Conrad Wallem gets a foot on it, and it's now a 50-50. St. Louis still can't regain possession. Minnesota does, and as soon as they do this, third time's a charm, because a couple quick passes later, they get to the top of the box, pull St. Louis apart like a puppet master, and then Pereira makes it 2-0 with a strike from the top of the box. You give Minnesota chance after chance after chance when they don't even have a quality build here. They're just sending it long, hoping to get the ball into the final third and still have control of it, even create 50-50s in the final third to get control of it. They have no game plan to pass the ball on the ground in this sequence, and yet we don't have the skill or the sense of urgency to be able to recover the ball versus just tipping it and disrupting a single pass. That was the most frustrating thing about this sequence to me.
Very frustrating, and Pereira was the one who recovered that 50-50, and he made the run, and at the end was the one that scored the goal. And when you talk about lack of urgency, after Pereira recovered that 50-50, I think it was JGR, the player he won it from. And if you look at how the whole play ended up developing, like you see Pereira making the run, but JGR wasn't following him, and he didn't make an attempt to continue running to the box and help defense. So that's kind of frustrating to see.
Kind of frustrating. An understatement a little bit there, Santi. Way to undersell that one. 71 minutes, the next big thing, the subs. Chris Durkin and Jean De Silva came in for Marcel Hartel and Celio Pompeu. We kind of moved to a diamond midfield here with Durkin as the higher 10, Silva the left mid, Wallem the right mid, and JGR the 6, while still using Akil Watts kind of as a wing back over there. So we dropped a little bit into a 4-man backline at this point with the Celio for Silva sub mainly. Chris Durkin, first appearance since March 30th. Really great to see Chris Durkin here. And obviously the impact that can and should have to the midfield depth going forward is huge. Durkin was used as an attacking midfielder in this game, where JGR was clearly the defensive midfielder, and you had Silva and Wallem roaming around a little bit more. The next big sub was the game changer of Julian Gressel coming in for Joaquin Pereira. And then at 78, that game changer made his presence known. It was a throw in from Minnesota that it went to their back line. So again, it was kind of methodical here for Minnesota. It wasn't a quickly developed play at first. Throw into their back line, worked all the way from right to left on their side, and just moving up on to the final third area for St. Louis. This was another example. St. Louis just lazily chasing. They were being outrun. They were just letting Minnesota work the ball through. They're trying to put numbers in that area. Like I said earlier, they tried to put numbers on City's defensive right side. So that side over with Akil Watts and Conrad Wallem. But you move all those numbers over and you fail to recover. You fail to turn the ball over. Minnesota is going to do what they do in getting it to their final third on the left. And it's easy to see how we allowed this goal from that point. Julian Gressel was yelling for the ball nonstop. Julian Gressel knew he had open space, and it was Kyle Hebert left on an island in front of Roman Berkey. Julian Gressel ended up receiving the pass and putting it in net. It was easy from there because of how much St. Louis had drug all their players over to their defensive right side. This is why I look to ball watching, not man marking, and being ineffective in creating turnovers when you've committed that many numbers. You commit that many numbers, you have to turn the ball over. You cannot allow that ball to get in behind or to your back line at that point, because what's the point of committing all those numbers to a certain part of the field, leaving the entire other part of the field open and vulnerable if you're not able to turn the ball over? Why even attempt that?
Yeah, you have to win the ball, or at least deflect it, clear it, and reposition. But yeah, that's the risk you run when you try to overload one side of the field. And Julian Gressel just 2 minutes on the field and clinical with the finish. But at that point, even without that goal, I think the game was out of hand. City wasn't really doing much to turn things around. Had made some substitutions. I think just thinking also about Wednesday, taking Hartel and Celio out. I think at that point maybe it was like, well, let's rest these guys a little bit more so they can be available for Wednesday if needed. So that third goal, it was at the end just the final dagger. But I think at that point the game was already out of hand.
Hard to argue that point. But after that goal, I would say the only bright spot of this game happened. And I said to you and Stu in our DMs earlier this morning, I said, I've got one bright spot to talk about. Absolutely one. And the fact that we're talking about it after the 83-minute mark is the only that's how little of a bright spot this was. But the sub from Klaus and Alm in for Teuscher and Watts, that was my only bright spot. Rasmus Alm making his first appearance in the season. It's not just Rasmus Alm making his appearance. It was Rasmus Alm making his appearance at right wing back. The fact that Akil Watts has been on the field for now 4 games, along with Hebert, Yarrow, and Baumgartel, and this back line has allowed 11 goals in the past 4 games, means that we are desperate for an answer at right wing back other than Akil Watts. And without Thomas Totland, there has been nobody. There's been absolutely nobody that we could look to. One thing I want to show for folks on our live stream, I haven't been showing as much video as I wanted to, but I want to look really quick at an opportunity that Rasmus Alm had at 85:03. And if you're listening to us on the pod, feel free to look back at this. It was Rasmus Alm's first moment in the game. It was as soon as Alm came in, he was doing what Celio did, where he was in possession, high up on the right side. That moment right here, where Rasmus Alm is making a line-breaking run when Conrad Wallem has the ball, is the only chance that Rasmus Alm really would have needed to make his presence known. First thing he did was get in behind, and he wasn't able to be found by Conrad Wallem. That's all it really there is to talk about that one moment, because we didn't have anything else after that. The the positive thing for Rasmus Alm outside of that run immediately entering the game is his positioning, the fact that he played right wing back. So getting Alm 10 minutes in this game, he is unquestionably a better option at right wing back than anybody else on our team, save for Thomas Totland. So without Totland in there, this is the bright spot. This is the one positive thing we have to take away, in my opinion, that Alm is now getting his fitness back and he's being utilized in a position of desperate need by St. Louis.
Yeah, so obviously this was just 10 minutes, but do you really think he will be used as a right wing back? Or do you think this was more like, okay, we need to give him some minutes. Let's use this game, and based on the personnel we have out there, he's gonna go as right wing. I didn't think about it as a
Well,
that's where he will be used going forward, but could be. Don't know.
Well, look who else was on the field, though. You had Klaus and Betcher on the field. And so if Alm's going to make his appearances with other those volume of attackers, where you have Silva, you have Klaus, you have Betcher, you have Conrad Wallem, and Alm is on the field, I think it makes sense to put him in that role, especially given what you've been willing to do with Salio, at least what this coaching staff has been willing to do with Salio, which is use him lately in that hybrid role. You can do something similar with Rasmus Alm, but you just need to have you need to have balance. So if you're having Alm move up, then Salio would have to fall back, or whoever that left wing back is has to fall back. If you're having Salio move up exclusively, then yeah, Alm needs to be a little further back. The downside when you're doing that with a wing back is obviously you take them out of the attack sometimes during the game. But the benefit is maybe you're actually able to progress the ball effectively on your wings, something that we have not been able to do. So the quality that Alm has on and off the ball, that run that he tried to make upon first entering was identification of where he needed to be, the speed to get where he needed to be, and just knowing that he would have had the pace to continue that run. So I like what Alm offers so much that I think so many fans forget what he offers because we've seen him so little, and he's just making his first appearance, 10-minute cameo on May 18th or May 17th. So I forgive anybody who forgets what Rasmus Alm can do, but don't forget back in 2024, I think it was, maybe 23, we had those stats of how effective City was with and without Rasmus Alm when he started to have his injury concerns. It was a night and day difference then, and I think it can be a night and day difference again, especially if we're missing Thomas Totland still for periods of time. So that's why I harp so much, and I tout Rasmus Alm's cameo appearance and where it was here. I don't know if that's the long-term goal and where they may slot him in, but this staff has seemed pretty intentional in where they put players, thinking not using Salio for so long in a wingback role because they didn't like what he offered defensively. And for Rasmus Alm to be initially going straight into the right wing back role in garbage time or not, I at least want it to mean something.
Yeah, maybe we'll see it on Wednesday in US Open Cup. I don't know if he will be fit for at least 45 minutes, but yeah, if that's gonna be his role, and based on how things are going, you need to start giving him more minutes. But I don't know. It concerns me a little bit if you have two very offensive minded players like Celio and Rasmus Alm at those wing back positions. But I think as long as you create the balance and Celio has gotten better defensively. I haven't seen what Rasmus Alm can do when he has to defend, but yeah, it could be a good option. I'm glad you showed that run he made. I missed it because since there were so many substitutions at the same time, I was trying to figure out who came in, who came out. But that's the run that City has not done a lot in recent games, and something that Minnesota did well last night. So hopefully we'll see more of that.
And not to read too much into that run, but it was a little creative too. So it was a horizontal run where you're running along the back line for just long enough to get them to step up, and then you split it behind them. That's what he tried to do. It wasn't a straight, you start from 10 yards in front of a defender and you try to run behind them because you're giving away what you're trying to do. This was a little bit more of a creative run that Rasmus Alm has in his back pocket. There's a lot of other stats and takeaways that we could say, but we really don't want to focus too much on that. I don't think anybody does. We ended up having higher possession. We had a higher line of defensive actions than City has held before, but I think this speaks more to Minnesota not wanting possession, And City trying to engage higher up on the field, at least trying to have a high press, a lot of defensive actions in the attacking half by City. We actually had more passes in the final third than Minnesota did when all was said and done. But Minnesota more than doubled the number of passes into the opposition penalty area, and they had more touches in the opposition box. So getting near goal was a struggle for City, even if by sheer possession numbers, they were able to get the ball into the attacking third. That first time, I think, in a while that we've actually had more passes in the final third than the opposition. But when the opposition's having 17-7 in passes into the box and then 27-13 in touches in the opposition box, those numbers don't add up to much success. We also had 0 shots on target in the second half. Second half subs, tactics, the last 30 continue to be awful. We continue to not be able to close out games, but not be able to come back into games. That 60, 70-minute mark, whichever one you want to point to, 2 goals again after 60 minutes. Just an abhorrent finish to the game, as bad as it started, even with Rasmus Alm being that bright spot. And I do start to, and I've been doing this more and more recently, but like getting into the Monday morning quarterback or Monday morning center back type conversation where you're trying to say, why didn't we play Jay Reed? What is Jay Reed going to need to do to get more minutes? Assuming he's fit, because at this point you saw what he did for City 2, you think he's ready to go, at least for periods of time. And in place of a Giannis Horn or Conrad Wallem on the left wing back side, what are you going to continue to run Salio out there and use him in that hybrid role, or do you let Salio be a little more higher up the field consistently? There's just a lot of questions that go into the usage of the players available, even as some are getting back from injury or getting their fitness back. And there's too many unknowns of how fit players are, I think, that it's just a frustrating game to start searching down that path. But the last thing I'll say, Santi, is to me, it was noticeable post game. And as we record this, I don't think the post game presser has actually even been posted yet. So if you're listening to this and it's available, go in and give it a look real quick if you're crazy enough to do that, because Olaf to me was noticeably deflective when it came to criticism of his players. I asked a couple times, what went wrong for City? Was this a tactics issue? Was this the players not doing what they were instructed to do? Did you see too many lackadaisical movements, slow moving players, slow to react players? And he was very, very much not into criticizing his players, which is noticeable to me because earlier in the season, he very much was into criticizing his players and the quality. He credited Minnesota even when I asked directly what went wrong on the City end.
Yeah, kudos to you that you tried 3 times and asking in different ways. But yeah, he just kept crediting Minnesota, didn't talk much about the team. I was on air, so I missed the rest of the presser. But yeah, I was listening when you asked those questions, and he kept going around just crediting Minnesota. And yeah, Minnesota did a great job, had a great game plan. But yeah, it was interesting that he didn't want to say anything about the players.
And I'm not asking him to deride the players necessarily.
Right.
I'm not trying to get him. I'm not trying to turn Olaf against the players any more so than possibly already is. But the way that the players performed was noticeably poorer than in previous games. There was like this would be the game where you want to call out effort given by players or individual quality. This was that game, not games in the past few months to me. And so if you're not going to do that, then you have to point to the tactics and approach that you yourself implemented as a coach. And he wasn't willing to do that. He wasn't saying, yeah, my approach to this was poor. Our game plan was ineffective. We're going to have to evaluate that before we go back to Minnesota on Wednesday. He wasn't even into that. He was just touting the quality of Minnesota. That to me was more frustrating than going into the player performances, because if you're head coaching a team that performed this poorly, you take ownership of that. And the only reason you don't take ownership of that, to me, is if you're worried that by taking ownership, you're giving ammo to losing your job here pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's possible too. Maybe we'll find out in the next 24 hours.
Maybe, but in the meantime, we have a U.S. Open Cup match to look forward to, and normally we would love to preview that and give it a look ahead, but it's the same team. We know what Minnesota is going to offer. The only difference that I can see for the US Open Cup is going to be personnel on the field. And the only question is going to be whether Minnesota, in playing an MLS opponent, one that you just beat 3-0 at that, are they going to go with the same approach they did against Lou City in the round of 32, which is basically play Minnesota United 2? I think 9 or 10 of their players were from Minnesota United 2, growing from their academy. So they were able to beat a Lou City team with their second team. So the question isn't, or the topics going into the Open Cup aren't about this team and learning about this team and the tactics. The question to me is really, what kind of team is Minnesota going to throw? I think we're going to get a strong St. Louis team. I think we're going to see Henry Kessler. We're going to see Klaus. We're going to see Marcel Hartl. We're going to see a lot of the players that rested a little bit more or weren't available in the first Open Cup game against Union Omaha. But what team is going to come on the field for Minnesota? And what confidence are we going to have as a team knowing that we just lost 3-0 and the same tactics, the same game plans are going to be applied by this organization in facing us a second time? We at the same time, we've seen what they have to offer, so there may be an opportunity to game plan better for the specifics of what Minnesota has done to us now that they were so effective. There's a couple different ways you could look at this, positive or negative, in going into this match. But this match, as much as any other match in the month of May, could be make or break for the psyche of St. Louis fans. Because if we win in this game, this round of 16 US Open Cup match, and we go into I think the quarterfinals at that point.
Yeah.
If you're able to do that, you have some semblance of hope for this season. You have something to grasp onto. Even during this awful stretch of MLS, 10-game winless streak, you have something to grab onto and say, we can focus on this. We can own this. We can continue to make a run. And while we're making a run, there's something positive to hold on to. If we lose on Wednesday, then you have a completely different story of not only is the MLS season slipping away, but you've lost the only other opportunity to take silverware and make a significant run in a different competition.
Well, that's what I think Wednesday. It will be a strong lineup, regardless of what Minnesota does. I don't think they will go full Minnesota 2, maybe a mix. But last night, if you look at that 4-player substitution they made, and yeah, it was late in the game, but if you look at some of the guys who came in, Jeboa, one of the leading goal scorers, so he will be rested. Sam Bing, Julian Gressel, they have some depth too.
Yes.
So maybe a mix of some of these guys can get a lot of minutes, and then Minnesota 2 players, or maybe they do care about US Open Cup. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. But in MLS play, it's worth noting what happened after this game. City drops to 14th in the West, sole position of 14th now. 7 points out of 9th place, which is the final playoff spot, and 8 points ahead of the LA Galaxy, the winless LA Galaxy side, who's currently in wooden spoon position. We do have the Open Cup, like we said, on Wednesday. So St. Louis has traveled back to St. Louis, and they will train early this upcoming week in St. Louis. And they'll travel back to Minnesota on Tuesday for the US Open Cup round of 16 match on Wednesday night with a listed start time of 6:30. So that's the next thing we have to look forward to. We'll take everything that we learned from this Minnesota game and try to apply it to a better performance on Wednesday. Like Santi said, Minnesota is not going to go in this with just Minnesota United 2. I think the increase in competition, MLS, they're managing their minutes a little bit better. So they'll have some of these players. I look for Julian Gressel to be starting. I look for Yeboah to be starting, some of these other players that we saw in the back half. I completely agree with you, Santi. So a little bit of a mix, but I think City is still dealing with the lack of depth as some of these players get fit. And it's a theme that's been progressing for way too long for any fan to be satisfied with. At this point, you just need these players back healthy, ready to go as quickly as possible, and to push them a little bit further, especially in this kind of match. This is an important one, no matter how you slice it. If this wasn't the last straw, creating a 10-game winless streak, then winless streak in MLS play, I should say, because they did win against Union Omaha. So 10-game winless streak in MLS. If they lose this game and are out of the competition, then you're looking at a 10-game winless streak being your only thing to hang your hat on in what this season is. There's a lot of questions yet to be answered by Lutz, Diego, and Carolyn as far as the direction of this team in 2025. But things are starting to slip. Things have been slipping further and further away, and they continue to slide further and further away. Santi, any last thoughts before we call it on this show?
No, hopefully the turnaround will start on Wednesday. City advances to the quarterfinals, and then another quick turnaround to go to Colorado on Saturday. But we'll worry about that one next Thursday.
That's right. All eyes go back to Minnesota for Wednesday's U.S. Open Cup round of 16 match. That's it for us on Flyover Footy for the fallout of City losing 3-0 in the first round of Minnesota, as we go back again in the Open Cup in just a few days. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you later.
Vamos, City.
All right. Thanks for joining us on this early Sunday morning, folks. Kudos to you for getting up and tuning in after a loss like that. If there's one thing that speaks to the passion and commitment of City fans, it's to wake up early the next morning after such a horrendous defeat and be willing to talk about our team, to be willing to search for answers, find and just commiserate a little bit in what's going on. Yeah, good luck to everybody for getting through this first part of this week, social media with what the firestorm is in this conversation. Thanks y'all. Have a great Sunday. Have a great start to the week, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, everyone.